If you've ever felt like you're juggling way too much, your to-do list is as long as your arm and you're struggling to find time to grow your business without running yourself into the ground, this episode is going to speak to you because it's all about productivity. Today, I'm joined by Kristen Edwards, who is a productivity coach and talent management expert who helps women, podcasters, and purpose-driven entrepreneurs create structure, build sustainable systems, and make time for what really matters. Kristen has got a background in psychology and organizational communication, and she's got a really grounded, thoughtful, and built for real life approach to productivity. And this has all come from her own personal love of productivity. She was talking to me a little bit about her childhood and how she bloody loved organization as a kid, particularly in her school workbooks. And she's now using all of those skills that she had back in childhood in her real life today. Kristen is also the founder of Amplify Ambition podcast, where she supports clients in building businesses that run with more ease so they can spend more time in their zone of geniuses and less time stuck in the weeds of their business. She's also a really busy sports mum and she has two athlete children, which is absolutely incredible. She was telling me all about it. So she is busy and she knows firsthand what it takes to manage a full life, a meaningful business without sacrificing herself in the process. And she has got some great tips for how to make sure she maintains her life as well as her children's, as well as her business, and also working full time. So if you want to hear about productivity and time management and some powerful tools which you can use in your business to make better use of the time that you have, this episode is going to be great for you. Kristen, welcome to the Remote CEO Life podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. How are you?
Great, thank you. And thank you for having me, Sophie.
I'm excited for this, because I recorded for your podcast a few weeks ago, so I'm super excited to get on to the other side of the conversation from your side. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, your career history, and what's kind of led you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I am a productivity coach. How I got there, honestly, I was that 12-year-old with a planner in school. I had highlighters and stickers and quotes all over my planner. And so I was just kind of that overly organized. You can totally judge me, it's fine. But even in middle school, just kind of knowing where I had to be, what had to get done. And really the truth behind having a planner is because I am the world's best procrastinator. If there is no deadline for me, then I might not even start. And so being able to see like, hey, this essay is due on Friday or this math test is on Thursday was really important for me to probably open up my math book on Wednesday night and study for it. But having, that deadline that kind of caused me to be really focused. And so that kind of stayed with me through high school, through university, and even into my career of even if my professor or my manager did not give me a deadline, I learned to kind of create self-imposed deadlines so that I would meet expectations, get things done, and achieve my goals. Always I grew up with a mom who graduated college at 18 years old. And so having that as your guiding light in life was a lot of pressure, both directly and indirectly, of I have to also be successful. I have to also meet things. And no, I did not graduate college at 18, but it was still very important for me to make sure I started my career, hit my goals on time. And so in achieving that career ladder and kind of climbing to the success I wanted for my life, I knew that that meant staying organized and being a planner. And then 2017, 2018, I'm hearing everyone around me being like, well, how do you know what to do? And I'm like, write it down. Like, what are you guys doing? But really thinking that everyone else lived their life in this organized manner and realizing that a lot of folks won't. And so my first business was actually in 2015 as a wedding planner. Again, spent a lot of that time with my brides on the time management aspect of like, you need to sign a contract by then, or you need to save X money so you can pay this vendor by a certain date. And that circled into eventually just helping people with their life productivity. And by the time the pandemic hit, I really started to focus on just business and leadership and helping people as they were starting their own businesses, having had my own for 5 years. But probably in the last 3 years, eventually came back to productivity because even as a business leadership coach, that time management piece was the thing that was the recurring theme with every client. And so it was like, everyone's a business coach. I don't need to be one. But this time management piece is something that is definitely my expertise. And so excited to help people with that. And on top of it, having to still manage my life. So I am still in corporate America working a full time job. I am a single mom of two kids that are elite athletes who travel literally all over the country. And so I have to maintain my own schedule of full time work, motherhood, having a podcast, having a business, and still having fun time for myself, which isn't a ton. My fun time is watching TV in bed, but and taking naps, finding a lot of things that had to happen. And so that time management piece is a part of my own day to day life, as well as what I help other people with today.
I love that it's come from when you're like 12 years old at school. It's so good that and I actually say this a lot is when people are struggling to start a business, sometimes it's really good to reflect on what you enjoyed or what you're good at in your childhood, because there is a quite high percentage of times where it will come back around at some point in your adult life, whether that's a hobby or a career choice that you make or just a side hustle or business that you decide to start. There's always some kind of tie, some kind of relevance. So I love that you are able to utilize those skills that you learned so early on in life now in everything that you do, in managing all of the things that you've got going on personally, but then also helping clients with that. I think that that's amazing that it's kind of come full circle round. And it's definitely with organization and time management, I feel like there's definitely a very clear split around the middle of people that are good at that and people that are bad at that. It's very obvious usually as soon as you meet somebody and on the state of their business or the way that they show up and present themselves, like which one they probably fall under, like coming up to a meeting late or like showing up just on time, for example. And I would say I borderline on the bad side of that. Not that there's a bad side, but the slightly more disorganized, because I have an issue with I've always had an issue with time. I don't know why, but I've always had an issue with like I underestimate how long something is going to take me to do or how long it's going to take me to get somewhere. And my brain just can't compute time in in the reality. So I've
Yeah.
always struggled with that. But I do always pride myself on never being late, never being early, but I'm always bang on time with things.
And
So
that's
my
something
mum
to
is
be
always
said.
fascinated by that.
You're
Yeah.
consistent about it. So there's something to be
Yeah.
said for that.
Yeah, but I would absolutely love to at some point improve my organizational skills. And I feel like the older I get, the worse it's got, because actually it's the same as you as at school. I was a pretty organized kid. And even in my early adult life, when I was working full time, I was pretty organized. But then as soon as I went self employed and I had this freedom and I had all of these other things that I had to think about, that's when I've really struggled actually with my organization and time management. So this episode is one for me to learn from, as well as everybody listening. And I know that you teach time management through 4 steps, which is focus, strategize, systemize, and optimize. Could you briefly talk us through that process and each step of that and how they all connect with each other?
Yeah, so that first one is focus, and I think that's really the most important thing. You can be super organized, but if you don't have a goal that you're working towards or you don't know the direction that you're heading in, and not that you always have a perfect milestone you're looking to reach, but you're like, cool, I'm going this way. I'm heading towards entrepreneurship. I'm heading towards a family life. Like I want to go live in a big city, right? Some type of goal. And so without clear focus, all the organization skills in the world don't mean anything. And so I always start with my clients on talking about like, what are your priorities? And with that, what are some of the non-negotiable things, just as much as what are the things you're willing to let go? And so it's always a balance that we kind of have to understand, but it starts with having a clear direction, a clear goal, and knowing what's most important in your life or in your business. For most of us as entrepreneurs, that profit piece is kind of important, right? You need to pay your bills. And so you need to be making money. And so focus on what are the things that I can do to bring in new clients or, kind of grow my reach so that I can then convert people to become clients with me. And so that having that clear focus is the first and most important element of it. And then behind that is strategize and systemize, and they kind of go together. So I'll merge them as I speak about them as well. I love to have people create an ideal schedule. And so the same way, and going back to middle school, right? You knew you had math at 9 a.m. and then gym class and then social studies. You kind of had your course laid out for you. And even in your professional life, if you had a 9 to 5, you're like, cool, we have our team meeting Wednesdays at 11 and my reports are due Friday by 2 p.m. I like to create that same schedule in my business. And so there's nothing better than having a deadline of my podcast goes live on Tuesday. And so worst case scenario, which I do not recommend, but I know I have to record by Monday if I want that to go live on Tuesday. Or I can say, hey, I know that this particular month is going to be quite hectic for me. I need to batch record and have 2, 3 weeks set up so that I can edit, produce, create the marketing materials and have that published and ready to go so that I can go on vacation or travel or whatever else might be happening for me. And so creating that ideal schedule of how much time do I need to script my episode, record, publish, or with my clients, I need the prep work for their call, the actual client call, the follow up notes. Am I giving them homework? Am I reviewing something that they gave me? And building out that schedule to say, these are my working hours. This is when I'm available. And this is, maybe I'm catching up on something on a Tuesday because I had a doctor's appointment, but my ideal schedule looks like Monday through Friday, 10 to 2, or a 4-day work week and I work 9 to 3, Monday through Thursday. It can look like that. Or again, if you're still in a full-time role and this is what you call your 5 to 9, that, hey, and this is how I started, right? When my kids are at their sports practice, which is usually 6 to 8 p.m., that's when I'm working on things like scripting my episode or writing the show notes. And obviously, I'm recording when I'm at home and able to do that, but kind of balancing out those times and being really prepared. And then once you've built out that ideal schedule, you can now create a system around it. And so if you're looking to batching is really the time batching is kind of the thing I recommend for everyone to do, and it looks different for different folks based on kind of how your brain is wired. If you're more of a spontaneous person, then I'll say sit down for 3 hours, knowing that like I've carved out this time on a Wednesday to work for 3 hours on that new project. Is that creating or outlining for a new course? Is it all of the emails for a new launch that, a service that I'm offering? Whatever that might look like, I know that like Wednesday is my project day. And so I have 3 hours for whatever that project of the week might be. Or I can say, again, if you're kind of batch recording for your podcast episodes, I'm going to spend 2 hours scripting a month's worth of podcasts. So that's the research and the outline, whatever is needed of what I plan to talk about. And then I'm going to spend 2 hours the next day recording all three of those episodes. And because I've gotten it down to a science, I will record those 3 episodes and then immediately go in and start editing right away because those topics of I hated that I said this thing are very much fresh in my mind. Or there's people who are doing 1 week at a time. And so you can sit down in that 3 hour span. You can script, record, edit, and produce all in 3 hours instead of kind of batching your recordings back to back. And so that's the strategy and the systems that you kind of build for yourself. And the reason I give multiple options is because everyone's brain works differently. And so you want to cater your time management to how your brain is wired, right? I mentioned before, I'm a really great procrastinator. I'm not going to miss a deadline, but if I don't have a deadline, I'm going to kind of let that thing stay until the very last minute. I have been that person to start a 10-page paper the day it was due. I'm like, class is at 6 p.m. I'm waking up at 8 a.m. to start this 10-page paper. And the truth is, I have been thinking about it for many times and I'm just sitting down the day of, but without that deadline of you must submit to your professor, it's easy to skip. And so I had to create self-imposed deadlines for myself of no one in my listening audience cares what time I release my podcast, but I need to be mindful of that for myself and having that consistency. I think it's really important to be loyal and reliable. And so I created that deadline to say it's going to be ready a certain amount of time in advance. And in order to balance the rest of my 9 to 5, my family life, other commitments, then I have to be mindful of when I'm showing up on my podcast. If you have a client call at 10 a.m., then like you need to be there and ready to go for that client. And so same thing. That means that I need to prep. And even if I say I don't need to prep until 9 a.m., I kind of know myself best. Or there's people who need to like prep and then kind of stew on it for a little bit. Then you need to say, hey, a client call is Thursday at 10. Wednesday at 10, I'm going to do my prep and carve that time out. And so I do think it varies the various time management techniques as well as yourself. The strategies can vary person to person, but you want to build a system that you can now be consistent with the same way you knew that in your 9 to 5 reports were due at 3 p.m. that Friday. And then the last one is optimize. Once you've built that system for yourself, you want to get really good at, hey, when I started podcasting, it used to take me 4 hours to edit a 45-minute episode. But then I looked at analytics and the data, and I found out people were kind of dropping off at that 20-minute mark of my podcast. So now I make 20-minute episodes. But that also means it only takes me 25 minutes. I am 5 years into podcasting, but it takes me the same amount of time it takes to listen to the episode. I've gotten really good at carving out. And then there's also tools of, I use Riverside to record, and it can take out all of your ums, likes, and stutters. And I'm like, click that button, take them out, please. But I'm also able to look at that transcript and say, hey, that was a clunky paragraph. Let's remove that, kind of thing. And so optimizing and improving your systems over time, that saying of practice makes perfect. No one is ever perfect, but you are definitely going to get a better result in turnaround time as you continue working on it. And you're also going to have a comfort with your schedule that you are really good on it. And now, can I teach that system to other people and go make $1 or two? What are those kind of shortcuts that I can share with other folks as well, or turn that around into my business to help? Do I go from one-on-one coaching to a group program because I'm saying the same thing 10 times? Now it's only going to take an hour and a half of my time instead of 10 hours each week. And so looking at those different ways that you can kind of streamline and optimize and also increase your profit margins over time with that. Literally, time is money. And so as you optimize your workflow, you are bringing more money into your business. I do not always believe in, hiring a bunch of people. I love having a team, but there's a lot that you can do using technology to optimize your work without always hiring another person.
I love that. It's such a great framework that you've just shared, and very, very actionable, I think, as well. Super easy for anyone to kind of adopt all of those processes you've just mentioned. But I do have a question for you.
Of
Well,
course.
how do you, right? So, one thing that I struggle with is I'm the same as you, right? Like, I am a procrastinator. When I used to work in corporates, I'd have a deadline, but I would do the work like the day before, the night before the deadline, even though I've had the task on my to-do list for 3 weeks, right? Like, but the day before it's going to be done. And I was the same at school. I didn't do revision until the morning of the exam. So asking for a friend, me, of course. How do you stick to your self-imposed deadlines? Because I've tried that myself and I'm constantly like, oh, but I could move that deadline. Unless it's obviously to do with a client or something that I've like fully committed to somebody else to do. When it's just a my deadline, for example, oh, I'm going to create content today and no one knows whether I'm going to want to put the content out or not, I struggle to stick to that. So how are you staying motivated to stick to your
Yeah.
self-imposed deadlines, please?
What's funny is you actually kind of just said it. You're like, no one knows about it. And so I
Yeah.
will tell one person. And sometimes that person doesn't matter, right? It'll be a conversation as I'm making dinner and the kids say something and I'm like, I'm going to do X by this time. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like,
I
it
get
doesn't matter. But I have now told another person about this deadline. And I am a type, I don't want to let anyone else down. And so although my kids do
Yeah.
not care whatsoever, because I've told someone else about this deadline, it now makes it real that I actually want to stick to it. Because if my child happens to walk by and go, Mommy, did you do that random thing you just talked about? I'm like, nope. Now I'm like, cool, I didn't hold to my own promise. And so I have told them to random parents at practices for my kids. I have told them to my actual children. I will say it in passing to family members in a conversation on the phone. And they're like, what? And I'm like, gotta go do this thing. Bye. Those are having that informal accountability has helped me. But it also comes back to that focus aspect of, is it truly important? Is it moving the needle in my business? Because if it isn't moving the needle in my business of, hey, this content is going to be, this is going to help someone enter the top of my funnel to become a client, then maybe it wasn't important. And that's probably why you're not sticking to that deadline. And so it helps to kind of start with that focus piece, because if it's not that important to you, then it's going to be hard to also stick to it. But I like the accountability aspect of, like, you could tell a cat, it doesn't matter, but like cats know if you're lying. And so just kind of telling anyone or anything, you can tell your plants even if you need to, but having that external thing makes it a little bit more real. And so we're more likely to hold on to it. But if it's not aligned to our priorities and our goals, that's probably why it's not as important for you to hold to as well.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think it's it's definitely something to be said about having accountability from somebody else, because like you say, you don't want to let somebody down. So if you have somebody else that already knows about that thing, and even doesn't matter whether they're involved or not, or even know what you're talking about, it just gives you that extra layer of like, if I don't do that and they question me, then I'm going to be in trouble in some way. So that's really good advice. And you mentioned something there around like not doing tasks because they're not going to move the needle. They're not going to be the money making activities. And I think many entrepreneurs, myself included, are very guilty of just doing like time sucking activities for the sake of doing the activity and not actually thinking, oh, is this actually going to move the needle? And you get stuck spending so much time on all these things that are actually not moving you forward. So how do you address that? Like, how do you kind of identify the things that are the money making activities versus the time sucking ones, which sometimes are equally as important, but maybe they're not going to get you the results straight away. There might be results in like a year's
Yeah.
time, for
So
example.
absolutely. So we always build backwards. And so I'll be like, hey, who was the last client that you booked and how did they find you? And so if that person's like, hey, they found me from my podcast. Okay, well, then your podcast is working, but they didn't find you on TikTok. And so if no one has found you on TikTok in the last 6 months, do you really need to be out here making TikToks? Now, if someone has found you from TikTok and it's working for you and it's at least bringing in, even if it's, things that help you kind of break even in your business and not necessarily a profit, then keep going with that. But you don't need to learn the newest dance, choreograph that entire thing, do the whole, recording in the perfect lighting. Now you spent an hour learning a dance to do it for 10 seconds and no one has found you because of that. In comparison to, hey, I wrote 4 sentences, posted it on my LinkedIn, and I had 3 people in my inbox, or 7 new followers, or 17 new downloads on my podcast, like whatever those things are, that's where it starts to make a difference. I reshare my podcast. Literally, it copies the show notes, like it's automated, copies the show notes and posts it on LinkedIn. But the number of people that in my day job have said, I listened to your podcast. And I was like, how do you even know I have one? Almost not realizing that it's sharing on LinkedIn. But those are the things that are getting me more downloads. And the goal obviously is more one of, and it's a minor goal, but who doesn't want more numbers on their podcast downloads? And
Yeah.
so that click automated of share my show notes and the link to my show on LinkedIn has gotten me a few more listeners. In comparison, I found that, a 10-second thing of, hey, this week's podcast is on XYZ face to cam stories has done more in getting me downloads in comparison to those 1 minute curated, here are the 4 things we talked about on this week's show that like no one cares about. But that 10 seconds of this week's episode is on topic ABC does work. And so recognize what's working and what's not. How are your clients finding you? Because again, this is thinking about the profit aspect of it. But whatever your goals might be, if that's not leading you towards more downloads of the podcast or more discovery calls, right? Not everyone has to book with you, but at least kind of moving down the funnel towards your sales, then it's okay to let that go. You don't need to be on every single platform. And so recognize what platform's working and which ones you probably need to let go of, because even that click to repost, copy, download, and repost on the next platform, that's 2 minutes you could have focused on something a little bit more tangible, like engaging with, an actual prospect versus hoping someone finds you.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because it is just so easy to focus on the things that we think we should be doing rather than the things that are actually moving the needle for us. And we don't need to be everywhere, but there is this, I guess, expectation, this pressure, this noise that's been created by people in almost like a hustle culture mode of like sharing that, you need to be XYZ places to be able to get seen. You have to do Instagram, you have to be on LinkedIn. And then it's like almost, I've definitely fallen into this trap myself of like being in too many places that my attention is absolutely nowhere. So actually for the past like few months, I've really focused honing in on LinkedIn specifically. And then now I've nailed a process for LinkedIn that is getting somewhat traction. I'm still working on refining and optimizing, like you said, optimizing that process to make sure that it actually does get me the results that I'm looking for. And then I can now move on to something else that I think that process is really good. Now I would like to focus on my Instagram strategy, for example, because that's dropped the ball whilst I've been focusing on LinkedIn. I think it doesn't always have to be all of the things all at once. It can actually be nail a process for one thing. And then if you want to move on to something else, you can do that when you've optimized that.
Yeah. And when we think about those people out there that are in every single place, recognize that they have a team of 30 people. And so
Yeah.
if you are a solopreneur, or even if you have a team of like less than 5 people, it's way less possible for you to be everywhere, where they have a LinkedIn expert, an Instagram expert, a TikTok expert, their social media manager who oversees those 4 different people, as well as the head of marketing. And so they've got 7, 8 people working on their various systems. If you're a 1 or 2 person show, then you're going to operate in a very different mindset. But also, even when they brag about a 6 figure week, they had to pay 7 different people those salaries that go with it, in comparison to what are you taking home to pay your individual bills, whatever that might look like. And so it's also very, as much as we hear people talk about, and I think even before we hit record, you were mentioning someone that you saw that was like, hey, I had to spend $8,000 in ads for that $15,000 client. And so think about what your profit margins are. Because as much as someone is talking about, hey, I made 100K, they spent 85K, then like, was it worth that? And again, there's different reasons. And if they're feeding 5 people, it looks differently. But what does that look like for you in your business? To just go make 15K versus making 100K, but 85 of it had to be paid out to other people.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. Yeah, there's so many things that you could go down that route, right? And talk about all of the different things that make us unproductive and the things that we should be focused on. But what I'm really interested to know is obviously you have so many things that you do focus on between like your business, your job, your kids, and you were just talking even before we got on the call that you've been away for a week with your daughter at a dance competition, which is amazing. But how do you find juggling all of these things as well as having time for yourself?
Yeah. So the kind of rule in my house is that everyone has one activity at a time. So my son has broken that, and he was in 2 sports at the same time this past season. But just as much as they get an activity, I also get something. So I sing at my church, and that's something that's really important to me. One, I grew up in church, but also grew up singing. And so being able to have that kind of outlet for myself is really important. And then in the past year and a half, also adding back in voice lessons. So I grew up with kind of formal training. And then, as you get older, you're just like, it is what it is, but really making sure that I could kind of hone my craft. And so added back in some voice lessons for myself to get really particular on certain things, and pulling out notes and widening my range. And so finding, just as much as my kids get that thing for themselves, I also get to kind of spend that time on myself. But that schedule of, as busy as I am, all of those things are happening between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And so my self-care of like, I'm done at 8:30 at night, the kitchen's cleaned up, the lights are off, I'm going to my room. Like, everyone is kind of, fend for yourself, it's bedtime. And so thinking about what that looks like. But then we also have what we call off weekends. And so if there is no competition, tournament, game, etc., that's scheduled, we're not doing anything. We're not going to a birthday party. We're not even going grocery shopping. Like, we will order and take out. I'm going to be in my room. You do whatever you want to do. Stay safe. Come get me if there's an emergency, but like, I am off. I am not responsible for anyone or anything. And I am literally probably watching an obscene amount of reality television in my room, but having that time to just unplug and relax. I'm actually an introvert. And so as much as I'm doing all these things, like, I also need to unplug and recharge. And so when we have off weekends, that means both Saturday and Sunday, you can find me in my bed doing absolutely nothing that particular weekend. And so kind of creating those, just as much as I block time for the various activities, I also make sure I'm blocking and protecting that time of this is for me. And so same thing with, going to the gym and getting my nails done. Like I put that in my schedule the same way that someone puts in, getting coffee in their budget. If they're kind of building out a new budget system, I make sure that I'm kind of doing the things that help me feel like my best self, but getting that sleep every single night of like, it is quiet hours, goodbye to everyone is really important to me. Having those off weekends to really recharge and refuel, as well as making sure that just as much as I promise to get my kids to their activities, I also need to kind of promise myself that I'm showing up for myself in those ways as well. And so that means scheduling in things like the gym and getting my nails done and scheduling that I'm going to lock myself in my room and watch TV.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got that nailed, honestly. Like was such a thorough overview of exactly how the process is done. And I think it is really important to schedule these things for yourself. And again, being a not particularly organized person, sometimes I forget and I'll do these things last minute, but actually it is really important to remember that you need time for you as well, and to actually book that into your calendar can make it feel way less overwhelming because you can forward plan exactly what you said at the beginning. It's like if you know that you're not working next week because you're going to go on vacation, or if you're having that weekend off and you're not touching your laptop, then you need to batch record all your episodes before the weekend kind of thing. Like there's so much to be said for that planning part, and it can really help you. If you plan your social life or you plan your private life, you can also then plan your business life in turn with that. I think that's amazing. It definitely sounds like you've got a pretty good balance going on despite all of the things that you're doing, which sounds like it's a lot, but like very, very well organized, which is incredible. And did it take you a while to get to that point, or has it always been that way?
So most people hit their burnout like in their 20s and 30s. I hit my burnout at 19 years old in college. I joined every single club, was doing like I was on the executive board of two different organizations doing theater, obviously going to school full time, was working a part time job. And so, what most people kind of burn out around 30 years old, I did it before I even turned 20. And literally took like an intervention of school advisors calling my parents to be like, your child is not okay. And my mom's like, oh no, she just needs to be busy, like not realizing how much I kind of signed into. But I had multiple advisors kind of have like intervention with me of like, you will not be able to sustain this, prioritize. They forced me to like choose one, eliminate the rest. Like, obviously, I could keep my job because you need money. But it was like, you cannot be on the executive board of five different clubs. And so, finished out my term that second year of university, but going into my third year was like, okay, I can be a general member of this, I can be on executive board of that, and then kind of let the rest go. And that was hard, but I'm also very grateful because by the time I did have true life responsibilities of a full time job and children, I'd already understood the importance of prioritizing, letting things go. I did hit that kind of physical and mental burnout again at a very young age that when I started to see the pressures rise as my son started to play sports when he was 5, and then having a second kid, recognizing, hey, I need to carve out this time for myself and my own well being. And something that my parents were like, hey, remember when you crashed and burned 5 years ago? Don't do it again, was always a nice reminder as well of, be very intentional about the things I say yes to and also being okay saying no. And when I do say yes, I kind of have, even though there's things that you kind of say yes to and they don't really have an end date, I give myself a personal 1 year. And so if this is not serving me at the 1 year mark, I'm out. And I do the same thing with my kids for their sports season. So it's not an automatic. My son does track, which eventually can go year round. But at the end of every season, I say, do you want to sign up for this again? Yes or no? And it's a choice that he gets to make. And so kind of instilling those values into my kids also makes that a reminder for me. Like sometimes you let things go. Things are for a season. It doesn't always have to be forever. And recognizing that I can choose to let go of my podcast or my business or get a new 9 to 5, position if that comes up. And I feel like there's a reason to kind of transition at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's a really, really great way to look at it. And one thing I think we spoke about it quickly before we came on the recording, but I did a meditation retreat a couple of weeks ago. And actually one of the things that came out of it for me is like we all have we have a choice, right? Like everybody has a choice. And like the choices that we make define our lives. And there were 9 people on this meditation retreat on the Monday. It's quite challenging. You're walking 4 hours a day on a 15-meter square platform back and forth, literally on a concrete platform, staring at the ground and for 4 days. And there were 9 people on the Monday. By the Thursday, there was only 4 people. And what I just kept coming back to is like, we all had a choice. We all chose to come there on the Monday, but then it was everybody's choice to show up the next day. And no judgment for the people that didn't get to the end of the session. It wasn't for them, but exactly what you just said about how you check in with your son and see if that's something that he wants to continue, or even for yourself, like the things that you want to do. We have a choice to say yes or no to these things, exactly what you say. Like everything is there for a season or a reason, and we don't have to continue if it doesn't feel in alignment with us anymore, if it doesn't serve us a purpose. So I absolutely love what you've just said there around like making choices, because I think we forget sometimes. We just carrying on with something because we don't know any different, or it's just like forgotten that we can say no to something. Actually, it's really important to remember that we do have choices, and the choices that we make define our next phase of life usually. So I think that was a really good reminder, specifically for this subject, that when it comes to all of the things that we've got on our agenda, we can choose. If we need to drop something, that's okay. It doesn't mean it can be forever. You could pick it back up at some point as well. But it's really important to remember that you do have that choice. So thank you for that little nugget of wisdom and reminder. And in terms of anybody that is struggling with their productivity or struggling with their time management, what would be your number one bit of advice to somebody to try and turn that around for themselves right now?
Yeah, I think it's getting really clear on what matters most to you. And so, it's easy, like as you said, to kind of get into those shoulds because of what we see other people doing. I think sometimes unplugging from social media can help us to kind of redefine what that looks like. You mentioned going on a meditation retreat. I actually do an annual retreat for my business each year. So every October, I carve out a long weekend. Usually it's like I take that Friday off of my day job and then like that Saturday, Sunday. And I'm just like, where are we going? What are we doing? What do I love and what do I want to let go of? And so I think getting really clear on what matters to you is going to allow you to make the decisions that are right for you in this season of life and this season of your business. There are some parts of business like taxes most of us don't enjoy unless you were actually an accountant at some point. So, but recognizing that it's a necessary element of having a business, whether you're a solopreneur or you run a large corporation, taxes are an element of that. And so there are some things that we might not enjoy, but if the pros can outweigh those not so fun moments, then this is probably something you should continue doing. Also, you're not a failure if you're like, "Hey, I just don't like being an entrepreneur and I want to go work for another person." You can go work for another entrepreneur. You can go choose to have a 9 to 5. That choice is about you creating the life that you feel best about. And so if the security of someone else submitting your paycheck every single 2 weeks is more important to you, then like do what's best for you in this particular season of life. Entrepreneurship will always be there and you can always come back at another point in time. But I think being really clear on what matters for you as a person is going to always help you make the right decision. And so I actually have written down like what are my non-negotiables in life? What are my non-negotiables in business? What are my non-negotiables in my career and in motherhood? I have multiple categories. And so as long as I'm able to kind of come back to that kind of North Star for myself, then I can make any other decision from that. And that's where the true freedom is. If you feel like you have to do anything, then you've lost that freedom in comparison to the I get to be an entrepreneur. I get to be a podcaster. And so as long as you can come back to that, these are my non-negotiables, but this is also what I'm willing to let go. And that's where that freedom really comes back to. And that's where you keep the joy in your business as well. So that even when you are itemizing things to submit to your accountant for tax season, you're like, here's the big picture of what my business has allowed me to do in my life that I can get through this not so fun tax moment.
Yeah, obviously there's always going to be things that we don't enjoy doing, right? And I came up off the back of that meditation retreat. I actually came up with like a little, those charts that you used to have in like a kids magazine. It's like ask a question, yes, no answer until you get to
Yeah,
the get to
absolutely.
the end. I actually did one of those off the back of this meditation retreat when I was like, oh, choice. Like, I wonder how I can incorporate that into my freedom model method, which is my group coaching program, because I think sometimes people forget that they have the choices. One, but also two, how do they know if that's the right choice? We get so paralyzed by sometimes when we have decision fatigue and not knowing which route to go down. So I came up with one of these like charts to try and figure out how do you make decisions that actually feel good for you and align fully with you. Because one of my North Stars, as you called it a minute ago, is to create freedom for myself. And there's various different meanings of freedom. But for me, it really does mean to be able to spend time doing the things that I love doing every day, to be location independent, and basically live on my own agenda, not for somebody else's, and obviously make money doing so. But I always like to ask a question, because I am so focused on creating that freedom for myself via online business, is what does freedom mean to you? I'd love to know. And you kind of mentioned it just then, but what does it look like for you right now? And how does that motivate you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that freedom kind of looks different in each season. I think right now that freedom to say yes to my kids is a very important factor, right? I have a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so giving them that kind of same creative freedom of pick your activity and I'll support how far you want to go. My parents did that for me with singing and with theater. And so it's really important that I kind of give that to them. And my business helps fund it because my kids pick the most extreme, expensive, travel to Florida 10 times type of sports. And so
You gave them too much choice.
yeah, give 'em a little I was like, we didn't just do the little, like, town recreational league. They were like,
No,
"I'm gonna be an elite
they're
national
thinking
junior
big.
Olympian, mom."
I like it.
"Okay, sure." So but thankfully, because of my business, I have the freedom to support that dream right now, and it's a season, right? Once my son's in high school and college, you're on your own, kid, like, have fun. But I love that I have that freedom to support their super expensive dreams right now. And so my business is what kind of gives me that extra to say yes to the $500 football helmet and ridiculous things that are kind of requested. And so I'm really grateful for that season right now. I can't wait for it to be done in a few years at the same time. And I can go spend that, where freedom does look like sitting on the beach for a week at a time or different things. But right, I truly enjoy being a sports mom to the point that I'm team mom of a football team, assistant coach of the track team, and cheering until I lost my voice, as you can hear in this recording at Dance National. So I truly love being a sports mom and supporting my kids in their goals. But that also means the freedom to put this down in 5 years as well.
Yeah, as you say, it changes in season to season, but I absolutely love like all the things that you said there and how much you do for your kids, and that the fact that your business is allowing you for that to happen. So that's the power of online business. It truly can create freedom, whatever freedom looks like for you. So I think that's amazing. And I'm excited to see where that freedom takes you in the future in 5 years' time when you don't have those responsibilities. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. That was super, super helpful and really inspiring. If anyone wants to connect with you, how can they get in touch?
Absolutely. So my favorite place to hang out is on Instagram. To help everyone spell my name, it's Chris, Kris, the number 10. So you spell it right. And then my last name, Edwards underscore. My website is Amplify Ambition. My podcast is called Amplify Ambition. And so really great strategies on time management you can find on all your streaming platforms by listening to the podcast.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. You've given some really great advice there, and I've really enjoyed listening to your stories and your inspirational organization skills.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks for having me.